Unfortunately, there will not be a guaranteed supply of gasoline at gas stations every day.
For years, Crimea was Putin's ultimate stronghold. Today, it is his greatest vulnerability. Life on the peninsula has devolved into a struggle, where even the most basic necessities are deemed a luxury. Gas pumps are bone dry. There is a severe fuel crisis on the peninsula. But the ordeal doesn't end there. From electricity and water to communications, transportation, and even grocery store shelves, everything is slipping out of people's hands. And in the face of this grim picture, public patience is wearing thin. A long-suppressed anger is now being voiced openly. The situation has reached such a critical point that even the occupation-appointed governor can no longer deny it.
Unfortunately, there will not be a guaranteed supply of gasoline at gas stations every day. As for electricity, it is currently impossible to create a schedule that would evenly distribute electricity throughout the Republic of Crimea.
But what is truly striking is the aftermath of this disaster. People are desperately looking for ways to flee these increasingly unlivable lands. Massive lines of vehicles are forming on the Kerch Bridge, the most secure route for this exodus. Furthermore, this flight is not limited to ordinary civilians. Currently, alongside approximately 2.5 million civilians, tens of thousands of military personnel attached to the Black Sea Fleet are living in Crimea with their families. Now, all signs indicate that a silent evacuation has begun. Moreover, this is not a mere guess or rumor. We know this directly from the mouths of Russian commanders through an intercepted classified document. A pro-Ukrainian partisan group named Void was the one to uncover this document. This intercepted telegram is no ordinary correspondence. It is an urgent directive signed directly by Admiral Sergei Pinchuk, commander of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Its contents point to evacuation preparations. The details of the order are highly striking. According to the document, all military units and institutions within the Sevastopol garrison were instructed to collect data on the families of their personnel and civilian employees. This means not only sailors serving on ships, but also coastal defense units, administrative staff, commanders, and even civilian employees attached to the fleet have been included in this scope. Furthermore, a strict deadline was set for the submission of these lists, July 10th. To grasp what this picture means, one must recall the sheer size of the Black Sea Fleet. This fleet consists of much more than just a few ships. According to data from the time of Crimea's annexation, it has a personnel strength of around 25,000, including naval infantry. Therefore, these compiled family lists are the harbinger of a massive logistical operation, potentially encompassing tens of thousands of people. But perhaps the most crucial part is this. This order is the final and most concrete link in a process that has been underway for months. The first signals arrived as early as April. At that time, the partisan network known as Atesh, which had infiltrated the Russian military in Crimea, reported panic among fleet units, noting that high-ranking officers were evacuating their families from the region. The second phase took place in mid-June. The same intelligence network reported an even more concrete development this time. Plans were being drawn up to relocate the fleet's remaining command structures out of Sevastopol to Novorossiysk. So much so that some officers had begun selling off their properties in Crimea without even waiting for an official order. And in July, that official, written order arrived. So the picture forms a complete chain. First a rumor, then an intelligence report, and finally, an intercepted official document. 3 distinct steps, yet they all point in a single direction: the exit. The most striking aspect of this scenario is who is fleeing first. Ordinary civilians are not at the forefront of this wave of exodus. According to both the Atesh Resistance Network and RBC Ukraine, the Black Sea Fleet officers, those with first access to that precious fuel and intelligence, began relocating their families to Novorossiysk without even waiting for the official order. The strategic implications of this picture are massive. Behind the bold facade presented to the public by the Russian leadership lies the reality that they see their grip on Crimea unraveling. This scenario also carries a haunting historical echo. The Black Sea Fleet had learned how to flee this peninsula once before in its history. Nearly a century ago, in 1920, at the end of the Civil War, the very same fleet withdrew from Crimea with 126 ships. Around 150,000 people were transported to what was then known as Constantinople, today's Istanbul. Now, the majority of that same fleet's warships have already fled Sevastopol. All that is left for the remaining ordinary people are the endless lines stretching across a bridge. The proof of this exodus is visible from space. Satellite images revealed a queue stretching more than 10 kilometers toward the Kerch Bridge, roughly 1,500 vehicles, with waits reaching 5 hours. And the most telling ratio? While almost nobody was trying to enter Crimea, those trying to leave numbered twice those coming in. The secret is that Ukraine could hit this bridge far harder and deliberately does not. In the words of the Unmanned Systems Forces commander, Ukraine is closing Crimea's entrances, not its exit.
We are closing off the access routes now, not the exit routes.
The bridge stands for one reason only, so the occupiers can clear out across it. Kerch is no longer a connection, it is a controlled escape hatch. The crowding there has a simple cause. The other doors shut one by one. After the rail bridge over the North Crimean Canal was struck, dozens of train services were cancelled, and the land road through occupied southern Ukraine sits under drone threat. Where the levers go is the story's mirror. Many Russians are, in effect, going home. After 2014, Moscow settled roughly 500,000 to 800,000 Russians on the peninsula with incentives like cheap mortgages. The aim was to swell the Russian population and push native Ukrainians out. Now, a significant share of that imported population is flowing back. Some are returning to old hometowns as far as Barnaul in Siberia, more than 3,000 kilometers away. The flight has reached the point where the leavers are unwelcome even among their own. As the fuel shortage spilled over, residents of Krasnodar began refusing to fuel cars with Crimean plates at their own stations. And those who stay? Fuel sits at the center. The administration turned to coupon and QR code schemes. The queues grew, the fuel never came. In Yalta, gasoline hit $22 a gallon, diesel started at 190 rubles a liter, and purchases were capped at 20 liters per vehicle. When the fuel ran out, the businesses running on it began to close, and people lost their jobs. Nobody knows what those living paycheck to paycheck are supposed to do. The uncertainty is as frightening as the shortage itself. Darkness joined the picture. The number of substations hit in a single day can reach 12, and the energy target struck in Crimea since the start of the month climbed to 83. Streetlights were switched off, generators handed out. Krasnoperekopsk went days without water or power, and in Kerch, residents now talk of the lights going out for good. With refrigerators dead, stored food rotted. Rationing reached the shelves. 1 carton of milk, 3 packs of sugar, 3 bottles of sunflower oil per person. The most symbolic frame came from communications. As the networks collapsed, the administration installed coinbox landline phones on the squares of Yevpatoria and Jankoy, a solution that travels backward in time. In the second half of July, the situation worsened further. A July 21st report by The Guardian provided an on-the-ground account of the collapse on the peninsula. More than 70% of the 2.5 million residents were facing power outages. People who had been without electricity and water for days said they felt as if they had been sent back to the Stone Age in the summer heat. Marina, who runs a guest house in Yevpatoria, said, "For 12 years we were told that Crimea was 100% safe. In just 1 month, we've been thrown back to the Stone Age without electricity, water, or fuel." Restaurant owner Alexei summed up the situation as follows: "We're searching for fuel as if we were in the Hunger Games." A satellite analysis published by Medusa on July 23rd quantified the extent of this darkness. According to NASA's nightlight data, the peninsula's illumination level had dropped to 1/5 of its normal level. Following the attack on the Balaklava thermal power plant, experts wrote that Crimea now faces the risk of a full-scale humanitarian disaster. Without electricity, water pumps stop, the sewage system collapses, food spoils, and mobile networks become dependent on generators. There was no sign that the crisis would ease. On the night of July 26th, Ukrainian drones struck the 470-megawatt Tavria thermal power plant near Simferopol. A fire broke out around the facility, and widespread power outages began in the northwestern, eastern, and southern regions. That same night, a Chornomornaftogaz fuel facility and a Russian drone relay station were also targeted. Even Krimenergo was forced to admit that the outages were caused by external factors. The situation had deteriorated so much that even pro-Kremlin bloggers could no longer be silenced. On July 26th, pro-war blogger Alexander Gorny wrote on Facebook, The situation in Crimea can only be described as horrific. Everything has long since collapsed. Gas prices have reached 250. The economy and tourism have ground to a halt. Half of Crimea has no electricity or water. Prices have risen 1.5 to 2 times. People are spending their last money on generators but can't even find fuel. Is this a victory? Did we win? Or did we lose? Gorny also noted that people on local forums were calling for donations for air defense systems, while Moscow remained completely silent, and the only source of information was enemy telegram channels. Military infrastructure also continued to be targeted. The GUR announced that on the night of July 25th to 26th, it destroyed a launcher and a 96 L6 radar station belonging to the Russian S-400 Triumph air defense system in occupied Crimea and released video of the attack. Operators from the GUR's Unmanned Systems Department had detected and destroyed the expensive system. Another attack took place on July 28th. Unmanned aerial vehicles struck an electrical substation in Feodosia. According to the local telegram channel Krymsky Vetter, following the explosion, Kerch and Feodosia experienced a complete power outage, while in Simferopol and Sevastopol, the lights flickered and the voltage dropped. Mikhail Razvozhayev, the Russian-appointed governor of Sevastopol, had announced the previous day, July 27th, that power restrictions had been imposed in Sevastopol to prevent a complete collapse of the grid, that a special operating mode had been activated at energy facilities, and that social infrastructure had switched to backup power systems. And this besieged life finally released the long-suppressed anger. Under Governor Aksionov's Vkontakte post, thousands of furious comments piled up and stayed undeleted. The ones aiming past the governor straight at Putin showed the dosage. Putin had said on television that Crimea would soon receive fuel by land and by sea. A user named Anatoly Kovalyov set the governor's "there is no fuel" against it and asked the near-dangerous question, "Are you implying the head of state lied?" Another reminded everyone that 2 days after the minister's "Crimea is full of gasoline" assurance, the fuel ran out. The critical distinction. This anger is aimed mostly not at the war, but at local officials and at the situation itself. Behind the whole picture lies a planned strategy, Operation Molochka, launched on July 6th. Unable to move its oil openly under sanctions, Russia was ferrying cargo on small, flat-bottomed tankers and barges through the Volga-Don Canal and the shallow Sea of Azov to larger tankers waiting in the Black Sea. Ukraine struck precisely this feeder fleet. By Magyar's figures, 147 tankers were attacked by July 16th, 117 of them the Azov feeders, and by July 13th, the straight passage carrying oil to Crimea had effectively stopped. The ferry line was paralyzed too. Esk was hit and towed into port. SKS-1 sank. Maria, Lavrenti, and Panagia were either struck repeatedly or now float only as towed barges. The line lost roughly 75% of its capacity. The total tally? 176 vessels and 96 energy facilities. The Economist's summary seals it. For the Russians, Crimea has become a place they can neither easily hold nor easily abandon. The trap's true scale hides in what Crimea is to Moscow. The fleet was the backbone of power projection reaching the Mediterranean and Africa with Caliber missiles, the logistics hub that fed the Syria operation for years. With Tartus largely lost after Assad's fall, Crimea remained the chain's last link. If it slips too, the entire southern power projection architecture collapses. Even pulling the fleet back to Novorossiysk is a confession of the bind. The port has neither Sevastopol's dry docks nor favorable conditions. And the safe harbor proved unsafe as well. In the big drone strike there in March, a minesweeper was sunk and anti-submarine ships took heavy damage. And Crimea is no ordinary land for Putin, but a personal matter of honor. By Taras Berezovets's reckoning, its loss would mean Putin's political death and the end of the Russian imperial project. In former intelligence deputy Ilya Pavlenko's phrase, Crimea is the golden key to Russia's imperialist ambitions. Crimea was also a 12-year showcase, and its glass was tourism. Last year, 76% of visitors arrived by road. When the fuel was cut, every artery clogged at once. Bookings fell 58% in 2 weeks. One tour operator saw about 80% of June reservations canceled. Student camp placements were pushed to September. Putin himself openly acknowledged that the energy supply and the tourist season were being deliberately targeted. A note of balance: the season did not die outright. At the end of June, 150,000 to 200,000 Russian tourists were still on the peninsula, the seasonal drop running near a third. The big resort complexes absorbed the blow, the small businesses paid the bill. The real danger is the spiral. No tourists, businesses close, the collapse deepens and scares off the next tourist. The collapse's most invisible victims are the peninsula's indigenous people, the Crimean Tatars. To a community under disproportionate pressure since the occupation began, Majlis Chairman Rafat Chubarov in Kiev offers an open survival guide. Stock food and medicine, stay away from Russian military sites, make a shelter plan. The Ukrainian state is preparing too. The Dovidka.Crimea emergency guide, published in Ukrainian and in Crimean Tatar, carries advice ranging from family meeting points to wiping sensitive content from phones and disabling biometric locks before Russian checkpoints. Inside the hope sits a deep hesitation as well. The disappointment of the 2023 counteroffensive extinguished these hopes once before. The people's message to Ukraine is plain. This time, do not leave us halfway. So does all of this mean Crimea has fallen? No. The peninsula remains militarily under Moscow's control and, for now, holds sufficient reserves. The most cautious voice comes from inside Ukraine itself. Former Defense Minister Zagorodnyuk says he absolutely believes in Crimea's liberation, and that it will not come in the near future. The window for using this advantage may be only about a year, since Russia will sooner or later copy these tactics and shield its shadow fleet. There is also a vast difference between besieging a region into unlivability and landing troops to plant a flag. The ground forces are still locked in heavy fighting on the main fronts. And one more risk on the coin's other face. In societies under pressure, anger does not always turn against the regime. People who feel threatened sometimes cling harder to power in a rally around the flag reflex. Do you think this crisis in Crimea is a turning point that will fundamentally change the course of the war? Or will Russia find a way to overcome these hardships too? Share your views with us in the comments. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching. Presented by the Geo Network.